Hello and welcome. I got a question from somebody that I was talking to on Discord. They were asking what kind of team I use to farm various things. If I have kind of one team that I fall back on. This is that team. I don't expect this to be especially useful in a direct way to most of my audience necessarily, but I figured it might be interesting for a couple of you. Maybe gives you some ideas about what servants in the future to roll for. Maybe gives you some ideas about how to build your own teams. So I just figured I would show it off, and if it's amusing or interesting or informative to a couple of you, neat. If not, no worries. So this is the team that I use to farm a lot of different kinds of things. I use this for events, I use this for free quests. These last two slots to the far right are bond farming slots. I usually use a friends list Merlin. That's not necessary. I have my own Merlin that I can use, and I will if I need to control tightly like what craft essence he's using. I find that that's not usually necessary. Arose, of course, is the best wave 1 guy in the entire game, because he's going to usually kill the first wave and then take himself out of the battle, which will bring Merlin in. For these last two to the far left, I'm going to talk about them as they're actually being used, because it's just easier to understand that way. Why I'm using those two specifically. So, with all that said, we'll go ahead and get into it. You might have noticed I'm using max limit broken kaleidoscopes on my Wave 2 and Wave 3 servants. That's not strictly necessary because Merlin is going to be coming in. He does charge the party 20% NP charge. We could get away with regular kaleidoscopes. I'm using those because they're higher level and therefore give better attack stats to those servants, thus increasing the likelihood that they can successfully clear the wave. I have actually, this is a free quest from Atlantis, which is the most recently released story chapter as of the making of this video. I've never done this quest before. I didn't look it up ahead of time. I don't know what's in it. I just know that this team that I'm using tends to work against most quests. There are some exceptions to that, and I'll talk about that later. So the reason that I'm using Xiang Yu specifically is because he gets pretty good damage, but also because his Noble Phantasm, as you might notice, is quick type. And we even got kind of lucky here and got some quick cards. So what this will do is it'll do a bunch of damage, but it'll also generate a lot of crit stars. The way that a lot of the game's third waves work is you'll have like 2 enemies, say, with like 70,000 HP, and then like 1 with like 150, something like this, right? Where you kind of have 2 relatively tanky enemies and then like a mini boss. So that last wave can be kind of tricky in that it sometimes requires, not in this one evidently, it sometimes requires like a mixture of single target and AoE damage. And not very many servants can pull off both in the same turn. So we use somebody like Raiko, who has an AoE Noble Phantasm that will deal a lot of damage. Of course, she's getting the benefits of both of Merlin's skills as well as my Mystic Code. She's getting her own skills. She also gets this skill, which pulls in crit stars and increases her crit damage. So she gets good AoE damage with her Noble Phantasm, and then she gets good single target damage with her crits. So as long as I get 1 or maybe 2 Raiko cards, she can pull in the stars that were generated by Xiang Yu in the previous wave, and then she gets good single target and good AoE damage. So as you can see here, we might even end this with just the NP. Her damage is really nothing to scoff at necessarily. I think she usually gets like around 110k per target with her NP. Oh, well. But then these crits, as you can see, really hurt whatever is still standing afterwards. So that's kind of how this team works. I find that, like I said, there's very few types of levels in the game that don't get taken out by this setup. As you can see, that was my first time doing that one. The rare exceptions where this team doesn't work would be if you have like a super tanky first wave of enemies that are neutral to arose. Like I did a free quest, I think it was in India the other day, that had like 2 caster enemies with 40,000 HP each in the first wave. So arose didn't do very well in that first wave in that team. But we took, 2 turns. Arose got as far as he could with his NP, and then we just kind of face carded down in the next turn. The enemies that were left standing. Took us maybe 2 turns, and then everything else worked fine. The other situation that gets difficult sometimes is if you have a second wave. Let's just show the team again while I'm talking. Is if you have a second wave of enemies that are not in like a typical 3 enemy formation. Like if you have a second wave with 1 really tanky enemy. Xiang Yu doesn't do very well in that situation because his damage isn't especially high for single targets, and his star generation won't work if he's only hitting 1 enemy. So if we make it through that middle wave, then we get into the third wave and we don't have any of the crit stars that we need to have Raiko do her thing. So that can throw it off a little bit as well. But overall, I would say I use this team a lot, and like 95% of the time it works flawlessly. So it's really good. You don't have to use these servants specifically. There are other servants who can kind of do the same thing. I like these 2 because they're berserkers, and therefore I don't ever really have to change them out. It's very rare that I encounter anything that, they don't have berserker class advantage against. But you could theoretically use like Emiya and then somebody else who has a AoE Noble Phantasm with a crit star pull skill. Somebody like an Achilles, maybe. I don't necessarily know off the top of my head if he pulls crit stars or if he's just a rider and therefore gets a lot of crit stars, but you can see what I'm saying. I like that kind of setup of the crit star generating NP in the second wave, and then the AoE NP with strong crits behind it in the third wave. And for events, maybe we take out one of these bond farm servants, we put in MASH, and we give these 2 like event craft essences so that we can boost our event drops. So it's a quite versatile team that works for a lot of contexts, a lot of different kinds of quests. So that's pretty much what I have for you today. I hope you found this at least a little bit interesting or informative, perhaps. This is my support list. My follow code is up at the top. It is also in the description if you like to copy and paste. Believe it or not, with a support list like this, I don't usually have a lot of open friend slots, but an unlimited number of people can follow me. So feel free to give me a follow if you're a newer player. You're maybe having some trouble attracting friends. Your friends list is pretty bare. You can use my follow code. Give me a follow, and then you can use this support list during story quests. Also in the description is going to be my Discord username. You can use that to contact me if you'd like to discuss anything, have any questions that you don't want to put in the comments necessarily, although I do respond to most of my comments, even on older videos. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, it's easy to do. Always happy to help out and answer questions about this game. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time.